Welcome to Can I Has Buff, the Warframe series that puts older weapons under the spotlight in the hope that they receive a buff, perhaps even one of the buffs I will offer in this video. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Panthera, a saw blade launcher similar to the miter, but comes pre-charged, no charging required, and has the ability to levitate the blade in front of the weapon to deal damage and status procs over time. The Panthera was introduced on January 15, 2015 in its own Tenno Reinforcements update. Functionally speaking, it is most similar to the miter that is used to create it, as both weapons serve as blade launchers. This is where the similarity ends, however, as the Panthera has lower damage, lower status, but a faster fire rate. The Panthera also requires the haiku in its construction, which may seem odd, but it's most likely that the large blade of the miter was too large for the Panthera, lore-wise, so multiple haiku blades were welded together to create the Panthera's new, smaller blades. The Panthera is also unique in the fact that holding down alt fire will launch a saw blade 5 meters in front of the weapon, and its damage changes to 250 a second. While the damage per tick is lower than the normal fire, the secondary fire seems to have higher status, which will stack slash procs on top of each other, allowing the weapon to more consistently take advantage of the slash damage. It still has low damage, however, but is very fun to kill enemies as they will stagger a lot and then split in half violently on death. The main criticism of the Panthera is the perceived notion that the weapon is weaker than the miter, which is used in the construction. And while this is true when comparing normal attacks, the Panthera can beat the miter with its secondary attack by the amount of slash proc stacking, although obviously this is mostly unrealistic due to its short range. So here are a few of my ideas to buff the miter. Keep in mind, all of my suggestions involve swapping the fire modes, making the normal fire be the saw blade and the alt fire being the method to launch it instead. Focusing on the saw blade mode, this change would increase the diameter of the actual blade and by extension, the radius at which it can deal damage by about 4 meters or 8 meters across the entire blade. The range would also be boosted by about 8 meters to account for the now larger blade. This would drastically increase its effectiveness, especially against large crowds of enemies who will all be bled and stunned within its radius. As for how this will work, the Panthera disc would look and act more like a glaive, starting out small but increasing into its larger and menacing size after it extends to its 13-meter radius. Keeping in mind that the alt fire now launches the blade, this buff would basically allow you to increase the damage of launch blades if they are launched as you are hovering the blade in front of you. Due to the blade having high RPMs when launched, it deals 50% more base damage and causes a guaranteed slash proc upon hit. While the initial damage, range of the saw blade attack, and status would be the same, this will synergize the fire modes and allow you to essentially charge up shots to be more effective at range. This one would be more difficult for DE to implement, but the end result would be immensely fun and also very deadly. You can no longer launch the saw blades, but the range is increased to 10 meters. Even better, however, is enemies who are currently standing can be dealt a devastating finisher when you are within 2 meters of them and by pressing the alt fire button. Your Warframe will first use the Panthera itself to bash the enemy, dealing an impact proc, and then ramming the spinning blade into them for 3 seconds, dealing 50% bonus damage but as finisher damage, as well as causing slash procs, all while the enemy is locked into a stunning animation. In this way, only enemies past level 50 will survive one of these finishers, and enemies past this approximate level will be left bleeding out from the slash procs. Of course, this does not remove normal melee attacks or melee finishers, but allows the Panthera to single out tougher enemies and rip them apart. So that's the Panthera, the miter's crazy uncle with a bum leg, but one who's still got some fight left in him. Do you like the Panthera despite it being fairly average? Do my buffs sound like good ideas? Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below and stay tuned for the next episode of Can I Has Buff.